Mr. President, I'm glad for a few minutes the President Pro Tem is here in this body and presiding over the Senate. Mr. President, for years, I've heard from Senate Republicans they simply wanted to do some legislating. They were tired of being shut out of the legislative process. They weren't able to debate legislation or offer amendments. Mr. President, they've assured the American people they want to be wholly dedicated to open, robust debate of legislation here on the Senate floor. Yesterday, a bill that was bipartisan in nature and came out under the auspices of the Chairman of the Judiciary Committee after actually years of consternation, debate, and just work by so many different people, came to the floor. But, Mr. President, that was blocked yesterday, blocked from even having a hearing here in the Senate floor. That's really wrong. This is a very important piece of legislation. It protects Americans' rights to privacy without sacrificing U.S. intelligence community's ability to gather the information it needs. Now, I also say through the chair to my friend, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, it doesn't matter if you agree with the statement I just made or not. Maybe some people disagree with this legislation, and certainly there are people who disagree with it. But shouldn't we at least be able to debate the issue here on the floor? Doesn't legislation of this magnitude merit the Senate's consideration? Yet, yesterday we were shut down once again. This has been going on for years. Before we even got started, they wouldn't even let the Senate debate this very important piece of legislation. We're ready, Mr. President, to legislate in good faith. We've been ready to legislate for the last 4 years. We've been prevented numerous times from doing that. The Republican leader and his caucus will have to do more than just pay lip service to an open, bipartisan legislative process. At some point, they must practice what they preach. Maybe that will be the case come January. Mr. President, last night, just after the vote on Keystone, I heard the Republican leader say that he'll bring this same legislation to the Senate floor early next year. So we look forward to coming to this floor early next year, and I would hope we could have an open amendment process and ample debate on that legislation that the Republican leader for months on record has wholeheartedly endorsed. And I really feel very bad that the chairman of our Judiciary Committee has worked so hard when we were in recess. We talked several times about the importance of this legislation and how we were going to try to move it forward. And we determined yesterday we aren't going to move it forward, even without a debate or a vote on anything. That's really too bad. Would the chair announce the business of the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. President,
The senator from Vermont.
I appreciate the kind words of the Majority Leader. Of course, he and I have been friends for decades, and he worked with me and touched with me all the way through on the efforts on the NSA, or Spying Bill, USA Freedom Act. He knew that we had co-sponsors, Republicans and Democrats, went across the political spectrum. There's an effort to do what was best for America and do it at a time when we would not be under urgent deadline. Most of the things that we were amending expire on July 1st of next year. And we had a piece of legislation began in the House of Representatives by a Republican chairman. We had added to it here a very clear signal from the House of Representatives. If we had passed it here in the Senate, they would have taken it up and passed it, and we'd be exercising something that would improve not only the security of Americans, but also the privacy of Americans and our individual liberties as Americans, and we do it not under a deadline. So it's unfortunate that last night there was a partisan effort to stop it and an effort to actually some of the worst fear-mongering I've heard on this floor in 40 years. But I said more a way to just thank the distinguished majority leader for his steadfast support.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
the reason I feel, and I've made my remarks regarding the senator from Vermont, there has been no one in modern history who has done more to protect civil liberties of people than the senior senator from Vermont. This legislation was drafted toward that effect, to make sure that we were able to do the necessary work of this country as it relates to what is in this bill, but also to protect the liberties of Americans. I have such admiration for my friend from Vermont, from his work on landmines, who at the time he started this conversation on landmines, he was it. But of course, there's now people all over the world who are following his lead on the many, many people who have been killed, thousands of people, and as we speak, still being killed with landmines from wars past. So the fact that we weren't able to get to this legislation does not take away in any way from the legacy of this good man who has done so much to protect individual liberties of people in Vermont and everyone else in the country.